Okay, so this is the second lecture video on the topic of sociology of religion. In the last one, in the first video lecture, I ended with a discussion about functional theory. And this one, I want to talk about symbolic interactionism and conflict theory, and then see where we go from there. So you'll recall that symbolic interactionism is a theory that's an individual level theory, and so it tries to explain the world or suggests that the way we understand the world is based on how people interpret symbols. And religion is a very symbolic kind of thing. So this is I think it's a very useful or a very interesting theory to apply to the phenomena of organized religion, because effectively that's what religion is it's an expression, a meaning, and all of those rituals, all of those things, they all have different symbolic meaning, right? So the religious symbols are used, so it really helps explain it. Yes, explain what all of it means. So all religions have some sort of symbols used to identify believers. You know, you have the fish for Christians, the cross for Christians, the Star of David. You have some of the other, and I don't know fiddlesticks, some of the names of the other symbols that are used to represent. There's an interesting discussion in your textbook about the history of the fish, right? That the way Christian believers would is they would casually draw the fish on the sand and then would wait to see how the other person reacted to this symbol that they had drawn. And if they understood sort of the meaning, right, it was a symbol that you were a member of that belief. And at the time, it would have been a cult, would have been considered a cult. They all have rituals, and rituals are rich with symbols. Some of the what we might call high churches. So these would be churches that have a lot of rituals, like the Catholics and the Lutherans and the Episcopalians. They would have lots of very, I don't want to say regimented or strict, but very precise, right? You wear certain colors at certain times of the day. You sing certain chants at certain times of the day. All of that's very rich with ritual. Well, and I keep focusing on Christianity as a religion. I mean, Christianity is a religion, but there's all of these things would also apply to like paganism, to Jewish tradition, and to Muslim. I just know Christianity a lot better, and I've been a member of various different Christian churches. And so one of the things that was very interesting to me is I was raised in a Lutheran church. I attended a Catholic church for a long time. And then when I became Mennonite is not, so Catholics and Lutherans would be high church, lots of rituals, lots of regiment. You stand up, sit down, right? You go through the same things every Sunday. And the Mennonite churches doesn't have hardly any of that. And so it was very different to move from one tradition to another where there were rituals and ceremonies, but it's almost sparse. There are very, very few symbols. Because because of the way that because of some of the traditions and simplicity, right? Okay, then you have this what cosmology, and cosmology simply means it's a whole system of beliefs that help us understand the way, or help us a shared meaning of the world and how we're supposed to be in the world. Right, so it's an idea system. Some faith traditions have religious experiences. Some have, well, they all have them, but the degree to which they are it's not the word ritualized, but the degree to which maybe they are, I don't even want to say encouraged, but not dogma, but their way they're built in. So for instance, some traditions, have this experience of being born again, or laying of hands, or speaking in tongues. In the altar calls, all of those come out of the evangelical fundamentalist Christian. Centering prayer was one we did a lot at the Mennonite church. It was just an hour of silence that I would sit with other people, and we would just, even in Buddhist traditions, they do things like that. Communion, right? In the Mennonites, we did communion maybe once every 2 months, and the Lutheran church I go to now, we do it every Sunday. In the Jehovah's Witness traditions, I think they do communion maybe once a year to symbolize the Last Supper. So all those experiences have different meanings, and as you move from one faith tradition to another faith tradition, those experiences mean different things and look very different. right? A moral community. So, what we mean by a moral community is it's a group of people who share a similar understanding about how you're supposed to act, and then to varying degrees from one community to another community, that group is supposed to hold you accountable for those practices. And in like the Amish tradition, and even in the Old Order Mennonite, if you did not follow the rules in which which were prescribed by the moral community, you could be excluded, you could be shunned, right? So there are also different consequences for not obliging or not following the expected rules of your moral community. So it both acts as a way of community building and bringing people together, but it also acts as a way of excluding. Hence the function of religions as a agent of social control, an agent of individual level social control. Now, if you are skeptical or critical of faith traditions, it may be because of your conflict theorist perspective, right? Karl Marx, and don't get me wrong, I went through my period where I didn't want to have anything to do with organized faith traditions either. But Karl Marx's argument was that religion, he was very in tune to the social control aspect of faith traditions, and he called it the opiate of the people, or the opium of the people. And in essence, what he meant by this is that religion acted as a drug. And if you think about this, I mean, if you think about how people use religion, even in our culture, that when life gets bad, right, when you have a crisis, people are more likely to turn to religion. Right after 9/11, a lot of people started going back to church, right? So I mean, this is documented in typical human behavior, that bad things happen, we turn to religion for help. It's like a drug, right? When we feel pain and suffering, we turn to a faith community for support to help us feel better. So, in that sense, Marx was kind of right on that we do treat religion like a drug. And when we don't need to feel better, we don't go to church as much, or we don't participate in our religious community, right? And so, in this sense, and then it acts as a way, not only is it a drug, but it's a drug that helps us deal with all the inequities or all the unfairnesses of the world, right? So it becomes a way we find personally, we can justify our disenfranchisement. So, in other words, it justifies our situation by statements like, everything happens for a reason, or God only gives you what you can manage, or the meek shall inherit the earth. And all of these ideals help to make us feel better when our life is like when we're at the bottom of the social triangle and we're feeling like our bosses are exploiting us. We can feel better by saying, well, it's easier to get to heaven than it is for a rich man to get to the eye. What is it? It's easier to get a donkey or a camel through the eye of the needle than it is for a rich man to get to heaven. And so we can say to ourselves, well, I'm a poor man, so I'm going to get to heaven and he's not. And then we can make ourselves feel better because we're poor and that person is rich, instead of getting up and trying to create social change. Religion makes us feel better about those things, right? What are some of the others? So legitimates. So other examples of that is that religion is used to justify the kingship of the pharaoh. In Hinduism, it's used to justify, why you're born into a certain location. And instead of doing anything in this lifetime, we're told that things will be better in the next lifetime, and that makes us feel better. And in that sense, it acts like a drug when we see unjust things in the world. So, all right, I'm going to stop here to talk about, and I'm going to stop here with this discussion about theory. And when I come back, I want to talk about a really important idea, and that is the spirit of capitalism and how, what was that fellow's name? Okay, stopping here.